For nearly a decade, a bridge has been rising above the Detroit River. 6 lanes of cable-stayed steel and concrete connecting Windsor, Ontario to Detroit, Michigan. Funded entirely by Canada, built to handle the heaviest trade corridor in North America, and set to open in 2026, after years of construction, testing, and preparation. On February 9, 2026, Donald Trump posted a 299-word statement on Truth Social, threatening to block that bridge from opening, not because of a security threat, not because of a technical failure, because he wants the United States to own half of an asset it paid nothing to build. In this episode, we examine what that threat reveals, not just about the bridge, but about how infrastructure has become the newest instrument in an escalating geopolitical pressure campaign between two deeply integrated economies. The Gordie Howe International Bridge is not a symbolic project. It is a critical piece of economic architecture. The Detroit-Windsor corridor currently handles 25% of all U.S.-Canada trade. Over 2 million commercial trucks cross that corridor annually. The auto industry alone, with total bilateral trade climbing from $32 billion in 1995 to $51 billion in 2023, depends on that crossing for its supply chain to function. The existing Ambassador Bridge, a privately owned structure approaching its 100th year, has 4 lanes and feeds into city streets on the Windsor side. It was never designed for the volume of trade it now carries. The Gordie Howe Bridge was built specifically to solve that problem. 6 lanes, direct freeway-to-freeway connections, modern customs facilities, and capacity for hazardous materials that the Ambassador Bridge cannot legally carry. Canada financed the entire $6.4 billion project. Michigan paid nothing. The bridge is jointly owned by Canada and the state of Michigan, and Canada intends to recover its investment through toll revenues once the bridge opens. An estimated 6,000 people are expected to commute daily from Ontario to Michigan via the crossing. The economic benefit to Michigan businesses, logistics networks, and auto manufacturers was never in dispute. Until now. Trump's Truth Social post on February 9th made several claims worth examining carefully. He stated that the bridge was built with virtually no U.S. content, that President Obama stupidly gave them a waiver to circumvent the Buy American Act, and that the United States receives absolutely nothing from the project. He demanded that Canada treat the U.S. with fairness and respect, threatened to block the bridge from opening, and stated, "We will start negotiations immediately. With all that we have given them, we should own, perhaps, at least 1/2 of this asset. The revenues generated because of the U.S. market will be astronomical." The legal mechanism for such a threat exists. The presidential permit authorizing construction was issued in 2013 and, like any executive order, can be revoked by the president. Trump could also block the staffing of the U.S. Customs Plaza on the Michigan side, which would prevent the bridge from becoming operational. No executive order has been signed, but the authority is real. What is also real is the immediate response from American elected officials. Michigan Senator Elissa Slotkin stated, "The Gordie Howe Bridge is an incredibly important infrastructure project for Michigan. Canceling this project will have serious repercussions, higher costs for Michigan businesses, less secure supply chains, and ultimately, fewer jobs. With this threat, the president is punishing Michiganders for a trade war he started." Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer called the bridge the busiest trade crossing in North America and said it is all about jobs, good for Michigan workers and good for Michigan's auto industry. This is not partisan pushback from opponents of the administration. These are elected officials from a swing state whose economy is directly tied to the corridor the bridge was designed to improve. When a president's trade policy generates active opposition from within his own country's political system, not from Canada, but from Michigan, it reveals the extent to which economic pressure tactics are producing domestic consequences alongside diplomatic ones. There is a deeper contradiction embedded in this threat. Trump previously praised the Gordie Howe Bridge project and described it as a priority. The bridge was designed, permitted, and constructed across 2 presidential administrations, surviving legal challenges, pandemic delays, and years of diplomatic complexity. It represents, by any conventional measure, exactly the kind of large-scale infrastructure investment that supports American jobs and trade capacity. Now, the same project is being positioned as an instrument of Canadian exploitation. The facts have not changed. The political context has. Candice Lang, President and CEO of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, framed the strategic dimension precisely. Whether this proves real or simply threatened to keep uncertainty high, blocking or barricading bridges is a self-defeating move. The path forward isn't deconstructing established trade corridors, it's actually building bridges. That framing matters, because what is being described here is not a renegotiation of terms. It is a demand for retroactive ownership of infrastructure that another country financed, built, and is prepared to operate, justified by the claim that American market access constitutes a form of compensation that was never formally acknowledged. This represents a significant departure from how infrastructure agreements between allies have historically functioned. Consider the pattern of the past 2 weeks alone. On January 24th, Trump threatened 100% tariffs on all Canadian goods over the China trade agreement. On January 29th, he threatened 50% tariffs on Canadian aircraft and moved to decertify planes built by Bombardier, jets that 648 U.S. regional airline routes currently depend on, serving 175,000 passenger seats daily. And on February 9th, he threatened to block a bridge that Michigan's own governor described as critical to her state's economic future. Each of these threats targets a different sector: aircraft manufacturing, agricultural trade, infrastructure. But the underlying logic is consistent. Assets, agreements, and trade relationships previously treated as settled are being reopened and repositioned as leverage. In each case, the economic costs fall on both sides of the border. American airlines depend on Canadian-built regional jets. American border businesses depend on Canadian trade flows. American auto manufacturers depend on cross-border supply chains that the Gordie Howe Bridge was specifically designed to protect. When economic pressure tactics begin generating measurable harm to domestic industries and drawing opposition from within the political system that deployed them, the strategic calculus becomes harder to sustain. The bridge threat is not occurring in isolation. It is the latest in a sequence of escalations that have produced declining tourism revenue, disrupted supply chains, and accelerating Canadian trade diversification, each development making the bilateral relationship more complex to restore, not less. Infrastructure carries a particular weight in these dynamics. Trade agreements can be renegotiated, tariffs can be adjusted, diplomatic statements can be walked back. But physical infrastructure, once built or blocked, shapes economic geography for generations. The Gordie Howe Bridge was designed to serve the Detroit-Windsor corridor for over a century. A decision to block its opening would not simply delay a ribbon cutting. It would signal to every company, every logistics network, and every government watching this situation that cross-border infrastructure is now subject to unilateral renegotiation based on political conditions that were never part of the original agreement. That signal has consequences well beyond Michigan and Ontario. It tells the world that even the most stable, long-term, jointly beneficial infrastructure projects are not insulated from the current use of economic leverage as diplomatic pressure. And it raises a question that extends far beyond this bridge. In an era where economic statecraft has become the primary instrument of geopolitical competition, what assumptions can middle powers and trading partners still rely on when planning the infrastructure that shapes their economies for the next 100 years? If you value serious, fact-based analysis of global politics and economics, subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.